Hello, everyone, and welcome to the One Soccer Nation podcast. I'm your host, Kareem Rae. Today, I'm excited to be joined by a special guest, Brian Bailey. Brian, thank you for being here. To kick things off, could you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Kareem, thank you very much for having me on the podcast. Big fan. My name's Ryan Bailey. I work in PR communications for a company called Red Knot. I'm based in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I also am a co-host of the Total Soccer Show podcast on The Athletic. I've been working in US soccer media for about 15 years now. So very excited to be with you to chat today.
Yes, thank you. Our first connection it was actually LinkedIn. But we had met in person recently in June back in Miami Conflict. So we got to meet in person. And unfortunately, I wasn't ready to go at the time when we connected to do a live interview. But thankfully, we're still connected and we're able to do one online. With saying that 15 years is almost 2 decades. You've been on that side for a long time. And with saying that, before we dive into the questions, the first question I want to ask you is, what was your first touch point? How'd you get involved in the beautiful game?
I think straight out of college, basically, my first job was in soccer. My first job, I'm probably showing my age now. You mentioned nearly 2 decades of working in the business, but my first job was working for, it was called the non-league paper. So the divisions below the 4th division in English soccer. I'd write match reports for them. And sort of one thing went from here to there, started for writing for bigger titles. I moved over to the US in 2011 and then worked for a few different people out here. So I've worked for Major League Soccer. We helped launch a brand called Kick TV, worked for Copper 90, written stuff for the likes of Bleacher Report for Yahoo Sports. I had a SiriusXM show for 3 years, written for The Athletic as well. And as I mentioned more recently, very much moving into the podcast space with the Total Soccer Show. Been doing that for 6 years now as well. Time flies, doesn't it?
It does. So you mentioned MLS, Kick TV, Copa 90, Bleacher Report, and The Athletic. And among others, which experience most shaped your approach to telling soccer stories, and why did it stand out?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think because I started my career as a written journalist and then moved into sort of more multimedia and storytelling via video. So I suppose the defining change there was Kick TV. So back in the end of 2011, it was an enterprise of Major League Soccer and Google came together to launch a YouTube channel, Kick TV. This is back in sort of the infancy of YouTubers and YouTube channels. So this was a time when Google were actually seeding this. They were giving money to folks like Major League Soccer to start up channels. And that's exactly what we did with content that was sort of Major League Soccer, but also European and world soccer as well, so get the sort of the biggest audience possible. And that was a real sea change for me in my career, going from mainly writing things to having my face in front of a camera, which I hadn't done as much of prior to that. But that was an incredible experience, doing video productions at games, doing some really cool interviews over the years, and just playing a part in the production side of things as well. So script writing, doing some editing and production as well. That was a real sort of game changer. And that sort of shaped the way I've done storytelling ever since, I would say, because as I'm sure we'll get to in this conversation, the game's changed from when I started. And a lot of it is about short form video content and about different ways to reach different audiences.
Nice. So you mentioned starting off being off the camera, more so behind the scenes, so then transitioning to being on the camera. What would you say was the biggest challenge for you to transitioning to being more so on the camera than behind the scenes?
I suppose it's a different skill set. When you are writing a piece or an opinion piece for a newspaper or for a website, you get to think about what you're going to say. Maybe you don't do that as much in a live interview circumstance. It's just a different kind of broadcasting, I suppose, is how I would define it. But I really enjoy it. I think it's the part of the work that I enjoy the most, actually, the on-camera stuff, because I think you can have fun with it. And obviously, it is the dominant form of storytelling now and has been for the last decade or so. And I don't think that's going to change anytime soon unless I'm mistaken. So
absolutely. So, I've been in the podcast space for about 5 years with One Soccer Nation podcast. What advice could you give me and for the other podcasters in the soccer space in regards to improving and wanting to, continue to improve and advance our podcast to the next level?
It's a good question. If I had any lessons from the Total Soccer Show and what we do there, it's that it's often strength of personality that drives these things, perhaps even more so than the content sometimes. I'll give you an example. I listen to a film podcast, and I have done for 20 years, maybe 15, 20 years. And I don't watch a lot of movies anymore. I don't have time. I've got 2 young kids. I do a lot of sports stuff as well. But I listen to this podcast every single week because I love the chemistry between the hosts. And I think when you've got an engaging voice and some people want to hear what you've got to say, even if it's on a topic that's not necessarily interesting to them, I think that's really key. So getting out there and, obviously you're a one-man band with One Soccer Nation, so it's a bit difficult to have chemistry with your co-host. But I mean, I suppose in sort of getting your strength of character across, I think is a really important thing to do to sort of differentiate, easy for me to say, differentiate yourself and get a USP in the space as well. And obviously content is king too. And I think there's been a lot of learnings over the last few years, certainly on the Total Soccer Show podcast, about the ways to reach new audiences. So a big focus on getting SEO right in your titles, and titling things is a real precise science these days. And I suppose it always has been, but there's been a real focus on making sure you hit the right audiences and get the right message across with your title to bring in new people. And a big part of it, Kareem, is something that wasn't a big part of podcasting when I started, and that is video and YouTube. So we put every episode on YouTube now. And there was a concern when we started doing that we would cannibalize the audio feed. But YouTube, as you probably are quite aware, is sort of the biggest catchment area for new podcast listeners at the moment. And it's a huge growth space, and it can help the show that you're on. So I think having a real concerted effort on putting your podcast on as many platforms as possible, YouTube very much included, is an important thing. Getting the SEO nailed down, and of course, making sure it's interesting and watchable. That's probably quite important too.
Absolutely. I'll ask you for some more advice offline, but thank you for sharing that.
Sure.
There was something else that came to mind. I wanted to ask you another question that came to mind was, again, this kind of connects back to me. I've been doing the show for 5 years, but there's a difference between doing media and podcasting to monetization. Are you guys in the space of monetizing your podcast yet, or are you guys not there yet?
100%. I mean, we've been on the Athletic Network for 5 years now, so they handle a lot of the monetization side of things, and we use their advertising network. But I mean, we have alternate revenue streams as well. So we have a Patreon feed, for example, which offer a bonus content offering for our listeners. And a big thing actually we've done, and which we want to do more, certainly going into the World Cup next year, is live shows as well. Not just as a means of revenue production, but because they're fun and it's a great way to engage with the people who listen to us. Because I think when you're doing a podcast, it can feel like quite a lonely enterprise. You're sitting in a room talking into a microphone on facing a laptop. It's very different when you've got a room full of people and you realize, wow, these are actually people who listen to what we say. And that's really cool that you can sort of engage with, and maybe it sounds a bit much, but like give back to them, I suppose, a little bit, have some engagement. And I think we get a lot of that through our Patreon too, because we have a Discord. So I think it's really important to engage with the folks who support you the most, I would say.
Understood. You mentioned the World Cup. I mean, this year we just wrapped up the 2025 FIFA Club World Cup. Next year's the 2026 World Cup. Potentially, for sure, 2028 Olympics in LA, and then potentially 2031 Women's World Cups. What have you? There's going to be a lot of big events being hosted in the US where you are right now. What plans? You mentioned the live, but are there any other plans that you have prepared to capture the value, the opportunity and excitement and hype that the World Cup's going to bring next year?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I probably can't reveal everything right now, but rest assured there are definitely plans. And I think not just obviously with the Total Soccer Show, but with my career in PR and communications as well. This is a huge moment for US soccer. We know what a big moment the World Cup in '94 was, and the launch of the domestic league that came thereafter. There is another big opportunity, and I think a lot of it could ride, frankly, on the success of the national team and how deep it goes in this tournament. Obviously, having a World Cup, a men's World Cup being held in this country, across the country, is just an incredible opportunity. It's a real moment. And I don't mean that in sort of a marketing moment for brands to sort of elevate themselves, but a moment for the actual game itself. And it's a moment to get into living rooms and into bars and into places which weren't necessarily engaging with the game previously. And that can happen in sort of small, the smallest moment in a game can sort of elevate that on the national conscious. There has to be like just one news story getting picked up, even if it's like the number one spot on the ESPN top 10 that day. That'll really helps to raise the tide of the sport in this country, in my opinion.
100%. What are your thoughts on the new format? 3 countries hosting more teams, 48 teams. What are your thoughts?
I like the fact that I suppose it's more inclusive and more smaller nations who wouldn't normally qualify are getting to qualify. I think that's great. I mean, obviously for sort of regions like CAF who've have a really, really tough qualification path, expanding that a little bit really helps. But at the same time, I think it will there's a possibility it will dilute the group stages a little bit. There's a danger of that happening. I'm not sure that it's being done for sporting reasons, frankly, the expansion of the World Cup. What do you think about it, Kareem? I'm interested to know what you think too. Do you feel like it's do you think like it's a positive overall or net positive to go to 48?
It's interesting. I think it's cool that they're innovating and changing up the format. I mean, economically, it makes sense for FIFA, more games, more stories to share. So, I mean, it'll be interesting. And I think I've heard it's something that they may want to continue to do for future World Cups. So they're kind of testing it out is what I've heard for this one. And then FIFA Club World Cup was kind of a test as well to see how everything goes. And just like anything in the world, nothing's perfect. And I think it's going to be interesting and we'll see what the fans have to say. But, those are overall my initial thoughts.
Yeah.
But excited.
I'd probably say also, I wonder if the days of a single nation hosting a World Cup are relatively limited going forward. Collaboration between several countries, and as we're seeing in the World Cup after this, in several different continents, could be the model going forward. And I don't have any specific issue with that. I think there's been some really good co-hosted tournaments for both like European Championships and World Cups in the past. But I mean, yeah, the expansion I think has its positives and negatives, shall we say?
Yeah, I'm interested. I mean, we could go on and on about the World Cup, but I think one of the biggest takeaways I've been taking away from some of the events that I recently attended to, like the World Football Summit in New York, was very intimate. And one of the big takeaways, during conversation was this will be the last thing I'll say on the World Cup, and I'll move on. Fans getting into the U.S., some fans being fearful due to Trump and immigration, etc. And that was one of my big takeaways from conversations I've been a part of or listening into. And I'm interested to get your thoughts on what are your thoughts on the fan experience and what fans are thinking about coming to the US and getting in and out, and etc.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly understand those concerns. I don't know how much I can speak to them because I suppose we don't know what the picture is going to be like for 2026. I'm not going to defend what's happening right now, but I will say that in previous World Cups, there's always been sort of issues going into tournaments. I mean, the first World Cup I actually went and covered on the ground was in 2014 in Brazil, and there were plenty of issues about infrastructure and the way the cities could cope with fans and how FIFA were changing laws so that alcohol could be drunk in stadiums and lots of sort of things that were eventually what didn't prove to be the hurdles that people thought they would be. I think you get that at a lot of World Cups. Obviously, there was a lot of issues with Qatar as well in the previous World Cup. So I think there will be these stories. I think there will be issues. It's quite possible this doesn't pass without incident. But yeah, I think we can only tell as we get a little bit closer to the event how impactful those concerns would be.
Yeah. Just last point. Qatar, I heard, was a great experience in regards to being able to go to multiple games because the stadiums were so close by each other, and that there was nothing like that from previous World Cups, is from what I've heard.
Yeah, obviously, because it's a pretty small sovereign state nation, so like as you say, you could easily travel between stadiums as a fan. It wouldn't be too hard to get from one end of the nation to the other. Obviously, very different story in the US. I think for travel and logistics reasons, and even things like hotels, this is probably going to be the most expensive World Cup for the fan ever. And we all seeing how prices in general are only going in one direction at the moment. But like even when for Total Soccer Show, for myself as a fan, I'm looking at how I'm going to experience the World Cup next year. I have to think pretty strategically because you can't go on. It's going to be pretty impractical to get to both coasts or to other parts of the country. And then there's considerations about like the hotels, I'm sure, are going to be pretty crazy around matches. There is certain logistical issues having it in a country this big. I can certainly appreciate that. Yeah,
sure. Okay, so switching gears from your early days in MLS to now, how has the soccer content creation evolved, and what do you see as the biggest shift in how fans engage with the game?
I think probably is the rise and evolution of fan-led content and influencer content and a social media focus. So I'll give you an example. When I first started out, I go on a lot of press trips if lucky enough to get taken to games or to different places to experience it as a member of the press. And the other people on the press trip would be from The Guardian or The Times or the New York Post. They would be from writers from newspapers. And now, if you go on on a press trip, it's influencers and social media folk who have got huge followings, because that is exactly the demographic who teams, federations, brands are going after at this point. That's a pretty seismic change, I would say, in the last decade or so. And that's combined with what I was saying earlier about a shift to video and short form storytelling. That is the desired medium these days, where it wasn't previously. A big social media focus, big emphasis on influencers and influencer marketing. And that's been a really fascinating thing to see, I think, over the last few years, and sort of how basically kids who have started a channel in their bedroom have become real power players in soccer media. I think it's fascinating. More power to them. I think it's great, but it's fascinating how that's evolved.
Yeah, first thing that comes to mind, Speed. I heard recently that he's currently the face of U.S. soccer. I mean, just the huge following that he has. I was in Miami, during Conflict. I got a chance to see one of the games of the FIFA Club World Cup. Miami play Al Hilal, and an Egyptian team, and Speed was there with some of the legends doing a crossbar challenge. I think before the game got kicked off. He was at the MLS All-Star. I mean, that guy is everywhere. But again, I heard a snippet that Speed is one of the ones pushing soccer for the U.S. He's one of the faces and names.
I could believe that. And I think there's a real there's almost a dissection in the crowd, because you got Speed like hanging out with Gianni Infantino, and doing video content with him, and going to various different countries and doing club-specific content with them as well. And it will play really well with maybe folks under 30, but maybe if you're over 40, you're scratching your head a little bit. So it's interesting how there's sort of, as I say, like a dissection or a dichotomy between the fan experience in that way and the way that influencers are being courted at this point. I'll be interested to see what it's like in 5 or even 10 years as well, how that landscape's changed, whether, amateur YouTube channels which have become professionalized go and become, under a bit more corporate, become under the wings of brands, if that makes sense as well. I'd be fascinated to see the direction of travel there.
Yeah, pretty interesting. I mean, this is a great transition into the topic of adapting to different audiences. You've created content for very different audiences across platforms like Yahoo. You're going to have to correct me on this one. I think it's SiriusXM, The Athletic. How do you adjust the tone, the style, and storytelling to connect with each audience?
I think it's always just about knowing your audience, and that's the case of any kind of writer or any kind of broadcasting. I don't change who I am, but I will tailor the content and sort of the tone and delivery depending on the job, I suppose. So writing for The Athletic, for example, that will be something that requires original reporting. There'll be an expectation of having some analytics in there as well, typically. SiriusXM, the US radio network, that's more of when we were doing a show there, that was more of a chat and a discussion and having fans phone in and having a conversation. So it's a different kind of vibe. For Yahoo and for Bleacher Report, I did a lot of opinion columns as well. So there you're almost like trying to build an argument for one particular side of an argument. And I think that's really interesting. It's the closest I suppose I'll ever get to being a lawyer, sort of building a case for something. And I think it's worth pointing out, because I do a lot of work on the B2B, sort of the business side, as well as sort of consumer media too. And you've got a different audience there and a different expectation and a different kind of goal that you're trying to reach with that kind of content as well. So the way you tell a story to a B2B, to a business press, if you're talking on LinkedIn or if you're talking in sports business press, will be very different to the way you're trying to talk to a regular consumer.
Obviously this is not a sophisticated question, but I really want to ask you, because I want to get your perspective. How important is media? I know that's pretty broad, but I just want to get your perspective.
Generally speaking, I mean, without it, we wouldn't know things were happening, I suppose, is the key way of looking at it. If we didn't have press and media and creating noise around events, we wouldn't know they were happening, generally speaking. So it's pretty vital for communication, not just in sport, but in all walks of life, I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. Switching gears again, what has hosting the Total Soccer Show taught you about engaging listeners over the long term? And what's a standout episode or moment you'll never forget?
I think that comes back to maybe what I was saying earlier about sort of the importance of engaging with your listeners and your most loyal listeners as well. And that's something we try and do with bonus content as well. I think it's really important to know your audience and know the kind of audience you're trying to curate and create, I suppose, to a certain extent as well, because we don't didn't sit down around a boardroom table at Total Soccer Show and say, this is our ideal fan and this is the person we want them to be. We're just talking soccer and one and all is welcome. So I think it's about sort of creating that space for people to come along and feel very welcome to be a part of it and not be gatekeeping and not be putting up any walls for anything. And in terms of sort of standout moment or episode, like there's episodes I'm really proud of where we've covered things maybe sort of pertaining to the Qatar World Cup, for example, or sort of stuff where we've had really good interview guests. I'm thinking like we've had like Landon Donovan on the show and things like that, for example. That's really fun. But the real standout, I think, is when we do the live shows, because I love doing that. I love interacting with our fans who very kindly donate their ears for us to talk at them for several hours a week. I think that's amazing to be able to do that kind of thing, frankly, I think is incredible. And that people come along and support it is amazing. So that, and I'm really keen to do more of that and to certainly do that in the build up, maybe even during the World Cup next year. Who knows?
Absolutely. I feel like you mentioned live a few times now. So, Kai Cenat, iShowSpeed, live streamers is a big thing. I mean, for me, that I've noticed the last year. So, and it goes back to, you mentioned some great points, like the type of atmosphere that you have, the excitement, the engagement, what's going on live. I mean, it's pretty cool. So yeah, it's a big note that I'm taking away from this one. You've done PR work for Serie A on, the global stage and for Orange County Soccer Club in a local market. What are the key differences in strategy when promoting a world renewed league versus a growing domestic club?
It's a good question. I think I'd say it's all about engaging the fan, but for different reasons, I suppose. So Serie A in the USA has different objectives to, say, Orange County SC you mentioned, which is another one of the teams I'm very lucky to work with. So Serie A, their objective is they want more fans. They want to grow the Italian game in North America. They want more stories, more promotion of the teams in North America, and to get people to watch the broadcast as well, to help create that, turn Serie A or keep evolving Serie A as a global product. So that's their objective, is to, get more eyes on Serie A as a general medium. Whereas a USL team like Orange County, ultimately they want to get butts on seats for their games. They want to sell tickets. That's their primary motivation, to help lift the team on that basis. But you do that by highlighting the true virtues and the unique selling points of the club itself. So for Orange County, for example, they have like an unrivaled player pathway. They've brought more players. They've sold more players to Europe than any other American team over the last few years. They've got unrivaled scouting. So that's a big thing, that they've got grassroots soccer going on. That's a real big attraction for their fans and for telling their story nationally and even internationally as well. We've been really good at sort of telling the Orange County story in Europe too. Orange County have done a lot of fan investment stuff as well. So they had a fan investment just for the UK market. So they're very conscious, perhaps, whereas other USL teams might be looking specifically within their market and the radius where they can sell tickets. Orange County understands that it is about getting their head above the rest of the teams and getting sort of a global recognition of what they do as well. But at the same time, it's still about, servicing the local fans too. So it's about emphasizing the other USPs. They've got like the match day experience. They do some really fun stuff around every game because they understand that soccer is an entertainment product. And to get folks who are not interested in soccer yet to come along, perhaps there needs to be another hook, whether it's a beer festival, whether it's having certain food trucks, whether it's a fun event with music or a concert. There is an understanding that really helps sort of bring people to the game who weren't there before. So I suppose that's the sort of delineation I would make. It's about growing the community for a team, but when you're representing a whole federation, it's about growing that whole federation on a much broader scale.
So thank you for sharing that. In your view, what has been the most significant change in the U.S. soccer industry over the past 15 years, and what challenges still remain?
I think just that there's a lot more soccer. I think there's a lot more interest in the game over here, excuse me, than when I first arrived. It's sort of the analogy I give, and I mentioned I live in the Carolinas. If we go to the beach in the Carolinas, when I first moved here, kids and adults would be throwing a ball, and it would be an American football. Now, if you go there, they're kicking a ball along the floor and they're wearing Messi Inter Miami shirts, or they're wearing Barcelona or Real Madrid shirts. And that is a real difference I've seen in the last sort of 10 to 15 years in this country. It's just got a bigger profile, soccer has. So I think that's something that the industry has adapted to, and there's been a lot of opportunities there, a lot more commercial focus. And I think, at an MLS level, there's been growth into newer markets, very much in Charlotte, where I am. A new team has come along. And incidentally, I worked for a couple of years and helped launch that team here in this market. That was a very exciting thing to do. The growth of USL and having several divisions and having, a new division being created very soon, and promotion and relegation. It's a huge change that's coming along. Even the growth of MLS Next Pro, where you're seeing markets that weren't served by soccer before are slowly becoming more so. And I think that's going to be a real opportunity going forward, where if you were outside of an MLS market 5 to 10 years ago, you may not have been that engaged with soccer, but now you're going to have more opportunities if you're in a state or a city that doesn't have an MLS team, because there's going to be other kinds of professional teams who are going to be serving you. And that's a really good thing. And in terms of the challenges, excuse me, I think on a grassroots playing model, I'm probably going to sound like a broken record, but it's the pay-to-play model, I think, probably remains a challenge for the growth and development of the sport itself. I do wonder whether it can be a truly mainstream top-tier sport in the United States when pay-to-play is the prevalent model, when, kids of all backgrounds are given the same opportunities they might be given in other sports in this country. So I think that might be something that evolves too, but it's a positive trajectory in the United States, and I'm excited by that for sure.
Absolutely. Thinking about stories, USL, MLS, when you talk about San Diego, there was San Diego Loyal that used to be there in USL Championship, and they got wiped out by the MLS franchise, San Diego. And, versus it's the switcheroo in regards to Texas, where this club right here at Atletico Dallas, the light blue jersey, is a brand new potentially USL Championship club that is going to an existing MLS market, but obviously there's a good amount of distance, etc. And Texas is a huge market. What are your thoughts on that?
In terms of competing teams in the same cities, or
because usually I think I've heard two, but I know for sure one was San Diego, an MLS franchise going into an existing market that USL is operating in, right? So the best example I could give is the San Diego one, right? Versus, so I want to get your thoughts on looking at like a club like Atletico Dallas, a new one that's going into an existing market where there's already an MLS team, but I mean, there's so much space and, enough space to add another franchise. I mean, in regards to USL's model, right? I mean, what they're doing, but Atletico Dallas is the first team to do it, to go in an existing market that MLS is in. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I suppose, that's, I suppose, the opposite of what's happened previously, as you mentioned. But even it happened in Charlotte. The USL team, the Charlotte Independents, have been here for much longer than Charlotte FC, the MLS team, have been here, but they coexist. And from what I can see, they both thrive, because, as you say, there is space in the market for both those teams who offer a slightly different thing. And the Independents will have a slightly different business model that will rely on their youth academies as well. There's space for all of them to exist, and I think, like Atletico Dallas, and I've seen those shirts. They are very cool. I like the crest and everything. They're great. And I suppose there is, as the game evolves and as the now surround soccer evolves in this country, there is, there's an opportunity for smaller sides who offer something a bit different like that to thrive and prosper. And they'll have different goals to FC Dallas ultimately, won't they? And they'll have different expectations of who they're going to have in their stadium and what kind of caliber of player they're going to have. And, there'll be opportunities for them that MLS teams might not have, maybe when it comes to promotion relegation, when it comes to other things that will be offered at their level. So I think it's very interesting. But overall, I think what really excites me is when you get a city that doesn't have any soccer representation at all, and then we're getting USL teams and other MLS Next Pro teams coming to those markets as well. Because I think the more we have, if you look at the map of the US, the more dots we have with professional soccer teams on them, the better. It's great.
Exactly. I mean, and if you compare it to England, I mean, there's so many teams in England, and England is such a smaller country than the US. So, I mean, there's an abundance of opportunity here for many more teams to come, many professional teams.
Mm-hmm.
Soccer brands are both culture and commercial assets. How do you strike the right balance between appealing to investors and staying authentic to the supporters?
That's a very difficult balance. That's one in public relations you have to sort of battle a lot. I think it's tough. Often, but not always, investors and fans have the same goals, right? They both want the same thing. They want prosperity for the club. So it's about knowing your audience and knowing how to communicate with that particular audience. And it's coming back to what I said about sort of the B2B press. So you can sort of silo the message to the B2B press, so your sports business journals and those kind of titles. When you're trying to appeal to investors and have a very different kind of story when you're talking to Bleacher Report or Goal or Yahoo about the kind of stories you tell to a fan. Often they can be around the same topic, but they are told in different ways with different maybe numbers involved. But it's, as you asked in your question, it's about striking the balance between the two. And it's just about communication. And once again, knowing your audience. The most important thing in my game is knowing your audience and knowing what they want and how they will react to what you produce.
Got it. Ryan, I want to share what does your day-to-day look like? I want to give our audience an inside view to, for someone that's at your position. It takes time. You're currently the chief operating officer of Americas at Red Knot, so it took you time to get there. So what does a day-to-day look like for you?
It varies. It can depend on what's on the docket, really, or what my clients require at any given moment. Obviously, as I mentioned, I'm on a Total Soccer show, so that's a part of my day to record that a few days a week. But ultimately, it depends on if there's a big announcement coming up. It's about strategizing what clubs and federations want to do next. And a lot of the day is, what makes a good PR person and what makes good PR is innovation and ideation. So you want to always keep moving. You can't stand still, which is true in many walks of life, many walks of business as well. It's all about having the next idea. And the thing I always say is what you want on your team and what you want to do is have those, oh, what if we did this ideas? The more, or what if we did this ideas you have, I think the better. So always trying to think ahead to the next plan. I'm probably not answering your question about my day to day, but I'm trying to sort of give a picture of sort of the different ways of thinking. So there'll be production and writing and putting together press releases and planning events. But there's also that time where you're kind of strategizing and thinking to the future and thinking of the next step for your current clients and maybe future folks that you'd like to work with as well. I'd say it's varied, and I do enjoy what I do, and I'm very thankful that I get to do it.
That's good. Do you see yourself switching careers anytime soon or wanting to do something else, or are you locked in and focused on what you're currently doing and continuing to grow and level up within that space?
Well, I'm in my 40s now, so the professional soccer career is probably in the rear view, so that's upsetting. But I think in all seriousness, I'm very happy with the path I'm on at the moment, and I think things will change in the industry in terms of not just PR and communications, but also like broadcast journalism as well. I think that we're obviously at the precipice of the AI revolution. That's going to change what a lot of us do. You and I are probably going to be affected by that in maybe positive, maybe negative ways, but it's going to change. So what we do on a day-to-day basis is going to be different in probably 3 to 4 years, I would imagine. And we'll have to adapt and evolve to that. And we'll adapt to evolve to the tastes of the consumer. We'll adapt and evolve to how soccer is looking in this country and beyond. I don't have a crystal ball. It's hard to know what that's going to look like, but I'm pretty sure it's not going to be how it is now.
That's the next question I wanted to ask you is how are you guys implementing AI? And if so, how are you guys using AI to be more efficient and implement it into workflow?
Not especially at this point. I think we have some clients where it's used to kind of create a database of work that's done previously. But no, I think probably what people in public relations want is sort of original human content at this point. So there's definitely a consideration that it's going to need to be used for automations and for sort of background work, I suppose. But for the sort of frontline production stuff, trying to keep it all human for as long as possible, I think.
Got it.
Yeah.
How long do you see that? I mean, as long as possible. If you had to put a timeline on it, what would you predict? Still that 3 to 4 timeline, or a bit shorter or longer?
It could be shorter. Things are going really quick, aren't they? I mean, I was one of my nephews I was with last week, and they showed me sort of the GPT where you can have a conversation with it, and it's so incredibly advanced. It was almost scary. I'm sounding like I'm 100 years old, but I'm familiar with GPTs. But this one was like, it was really responsive. It was very quick. It was very human in the way it was having discourse. I think that if that's where we're at, I mean, like call centers and that kind of thing are going to be gone really soon, I would imagine. And that's going to start creeping into other walks of life. And I mean, I know that AI content creation is a very big thing. I'm seeing a lot about it on my travels on LinkedIn at the moment. I think that's going to be more prevalent. Whether there's a remaining appetite for AI created content going forward, I mean, it's going to get better and more refined, I suppose. But I think that remains to be seen, whether there is whether there will be a desire to have a real human giving their real thoughts and their original thoughts, not that have been composited from thousands of other thoughts previously.
Yeah, it's a whole topic in itself. It's
Yeah.
really interesting. For those aspiring to work in soccer media or communications today, what skills and qualities do you think are essential to thrive in the industry?
I suppose it depends what you want to do exactly in the industry, but I think certainly if you want to be in broadcast or if you want to be in the media, like having training or having experience of being in front of a camera is just very, very important. Like at the BBC for the last 4 or 5 years, if you want to work in media, you have to have on camera training and you have to have that in your arsenal, where that wasn't the case even not that long ago. So that's really important. I think knowing your business and knowing your product is really important. Like, I think if you don't know the game, you probably get found out reasonably quickly in this day and age because of the sort of interactivity that we have and sort of the engagement that we have with the people who consume our work. In terms of skills and qualities, I mean, I think this is probably true of most businesses, but being nice and easy to work with is really important. So I think that's probably a maxim that we can all carry on with our lives. But I mean, it's an interesting industry because it can be very long hours, it can be weekends. So I suppose adaptability and a willingness to sort of put yourself out there, I suppose, is really important. When I first started in my career, I had sort of one of my mentors. I was working at a magazine at the time, and their best advice they gave was, if you're given an opportunity to do some work, always say yes. And if you keep doing that, you'll grow. And I think that was, I still take that as pretty good advice, is to not put up any walls, don't give yourself a reason to say no. If you think you've got something in your locker and you can do it, say yes and take the opportunity. That would be my advice.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. Looking ahead, where do you see the biggest growth opportunities for U.S. soccer, both on the field, in the business, and media landscape surrounding it?
I think there's probably a couple of different answers to that. One is probably, as I've mentioned before, it's excuse me, growing in territories, the growth of the sport in territories that aren't currently served. As we get an extra USL league develop, as we have sort of more lower league teams developing, that is a huge opportunity to reach people who don't have soccer within their radius currently. And I think that's going to improve more and more. I see that the growth actually being in teams themselves. In more established markets in Europe, in South America, the teams are, where teams are 100 years old plus, you don't have that same kind of opportunity to create something new and to create a new culture as well. And that's something that's very probably a discussion we should have as well, about the creation of the culture around these teams that reflects the city they're in, that reflects having something to say. Because, I mean, I think a lot of the world's biggest teams, one of the reasons people like them is they have something to say. They have a position. So I think that's very cool that US soccer has this opportunity in all these different markets to create different clubs that have different ways of doing things and represent different things. That's very cool. So they're not all homogenized and kind of the same thing. I really like that. And I think more generally, in terms of the growth of the sport, I think there's a lot of opportunity to get soccer on broadcast television, getting it up from behind the paywall. So something that Serie A, for example, had a real concerted effort at doing this past season was getting games on big CBS, on the main broadcast channel. And it had 4 of them this past season. So obviously it's great that one of the best things about being a soccer fan in the US is that you can watch more soccer than basically any other market. You can watch more English games than you can in England in this country, which is wild to think when you think about it, right? And you can watch every Serie A game, you can watch every Liga game, you can watch so much soccer here. So, but a lot of it obviously is behind a paywall. So I think I really admire the leagues who've partnered with broadcasters who are willing to put it on regular TV to reach people who wouldn't see that game previously. So, you can CBS being an example there. And one of the businesses I give the most credit to growing the game over the last 10 years, honestly, is NBC. So they got the Premier League rights in 2013. And I think they have done such an incredible job of growing the Premier League and de facto growing soccer in this country by the quality of their coverage, by the fact that they're willing to dedicate many slots during the season, 1 or 2 a week, to the main broadcast channel. So that's really, really helped the growth of the game, really helped the growth of the Premier League, I think. So I think non-paywalled coverage on broadcast TV is where there's a huge opportunity. I mean, we have a lot of it now. We can have more. And I think the more we have of that, the merrier, frankly.
Yeah, that's a new topic for me. I think what I could link back to is what you had mentioned, the opportunity in the US where investors want to get into England, for example, they would have to buy an existing club or they'd have to start from the bottom. Versus you got the US where you can buy your way into the top of the pyramid per se. I mean, Division 2, Division 3, USL, you got MLS Next Pro in Division 3, as well as the women franchises. And as you'd said, starting a community asset from the ground up, building the logo, choosing the colors, the club name, doing all those cool, fun things that some investors want to do, and creating a community asset, creating a place for people to work, live, and play. Cities want this too. I've talked to cities that, I was just in Spokane, Washington at the USL Expansion Summit, and met some city officials, the commissioner, and some city officials from a market in Texas, and they shared why they want to bring professional soccer to their market, right? So I think it's pretty cool. For me, I've always had the conversation with owners or investors that want to bring professional soccer to their market and the reasons why, but it was cool. I'm hearing a bit more now, connecting with more city officials, of why they want to bring professional soccer. That's a new topic per se that's intriguing to me, because you do need both a group that's going to lead the project, but as well as the partnership and commitment and support of the city in order to make these things happen and push the ball forward together, as well as being able to have the franchise from USL. So it's a big opportunity. And the other thing too is the opportunity of real estate, the mixed use development opportunity of soccer being the anchor of, which these projects are ranging from 100 million to $1 billion plus. And, one of the biggest ones I've heard of that we've had on the podcast was Steve Livingstone, which was it's $1 billion mixed use project in Florida. It's Jacksonville. We had Brett Johnson from Rhode Island. They were doing a $400 million mixed use development. So these are huge developments that are happening in the US.
Yeah. It's really exciting. And obviously there's a lot of US investment in European teams, like half of the Premier League is American owned, half of Serie A, the same thing. But there, as you say, there are blank canvases all over this country for investment and for community investment too. And that is a really, really exciting thing. So the more of that, I think that it's just a great opportunity. And what's causing that is the fact that soccer is no longer a niche sport. It's no longer a small sport in this country, right? It's a big deal, and we can talk about the reasons for that. I think, as I mentioned, NBC is a big reason for that. You can talk about the Messi effect, and that's crazy, because even I was traveling in Europe this summer, and Messi Inter Miami shirts everywhere. You would never have seen MLS shirts in Europe before, and you're seeing them now. His effect is real. So that and just creating sort of public consciousness of the sport, and as the world gets smaller, as the internet has made the world smaller, and as sort of it sounds a bit cliche, but opening the eyes of the US soccer fan to this sport that's the biggest sport in the world and that everybody else loves, that's great. And that has created so much opportunity. And yeah, I'm excited to see how it keeps growing over the next few years. More power to it.
Yeah. But my raw internal feeling of the impact of what I haven't been to a World Cup yet, but my feeling of what the World Cup's going to do to North America, like Canada, US, and Mexico. Most importantly, I'm primarily focused on the US. I think it's going to just be huge, and it's just going to bring a lot of fans within the beautiful game. I could just visualize it. But with saying that, there's Brian, there's so much for us to talk about. I think alone, the World Cup could be a topic alone. We could just go back and forth on, with saying that, was there anything that I missed importantly that you wanted to just share as well?
No, I don't think so. I think we covered a pretty broad range of topics here. If you are a team or a federation that's looking for some PR support, I'm here. Very happy to have a conversation with you. It'd be remiss of me not to say that. And also, please do like and subscribe and tune into the Total Soccer Show. It's a great show, if I don't say so myself. But I think, just to re-emphasize, Kareem, I think that soccer is in a really good spot in this country. And as you say, the World Cup is a huge sort of tentpole moment, another one for this country that I think could have even more positive implications for the sport here. I'm here for it. Very excited.
1,000%. And I'm looking forward to tapping into your podcast, listening more. With saying that, Ryan, once again, I truly appreciate you taking the time to join us on the One Soccer Nation podcast.
Thanks for having me. Cheers.